Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm talking to a very interesting chap about home education. We know that the schools are causing all sorts of issues and problems with the curriculum and some of the how can I put this, some of the policies that schools in this modern day and age are now foisting not only on children but also on parents. Very different from when my kids, who are now in their 30s, went to school, or indeed when I went to school in the late 60s and 70s. Yes, I really am that old. So today I'd like to introduce you to Crypto Rich, which is the name, well, Rich is his real name, but Crypto Rich is his channel. He talks about alternative money, about crypto and all sorts of things. And of course, in this modern times, how can anybody avoid talking about the very odd and slightly sinister things that are going on? Rich, it's delightful to see you. How are you, sir?
Oh, Richard, thank you so much for agreeing to have me on. I've been so excited about coming on.
So
I'm really
we're
well.
going to talk about home education, but before we get on to that, because that's a very interesting and important subject, just tell us a little bit about your current channel, because I've sort of given it a very vague introduction, because you're an interesting chap who does all sorts of things.
Yes, thank you. Well, my I've been running a crypto channel since April 2017. I've been shadow banned by YouTube for I don't know, 3 years now. So mostly I post stuff on bit.ly/crypto rich odyssey. You can also follow me on Twitter, crypto rich YT, and join my official Telegram announcements channel. And I'll make sure to give you the link, Richard.
Yeah.
What I want to say is I started off doing crypto, but I also do a little bit about health. And since the lockdown, I've been doing more and more about COVID, about the harm of certain promoted medical treatments, which I didn't have myself because there's no way I'm going to have that. And I cover more and more politics stuff, including, all the factors that go into affecting our Earth's climate. I do stuff on CBDCs. I do stuff on macro politics. So it's quite varied. And I do a little bit on home education because I think it's one of the ways that we as parents can protect our children from some of the malign influences that
Mm.
are seek to I don't know, direct them in a particular way.
Yes,
And
and
the other
and
thing I
that
want to say is that I'm also a child protection social worker. That's what I qualified in.
right. So that gives you a fascinating insight to both sides of what families having to cope with these days, and of course with schools and the whole process of having kids at home. And people saw how difficult, if they're not home educating already, how difficult it was during the COVID period, the lockdown period, of how difficult it was to motivate children, get them to sign on to whatever computer system it was, and to deal with kids. And a lot of people have never had to do that, because normally your kids go off to the institutions, you go off to work, and as a unit, you're not sort of on top of each other. So home education, people may have got a completely wrong idea of what home education is based on the rather restrictive period that we went through. Would you say that's
Yeah, yeah,
true?
yeah. It's true since lockdown, and it was true before. There's what school does,
Mm,
right? And what schooling is, and then there's what schooling is, and then there's home education,
right.
and two are completely different paradigms. Now, just to say, my 18-year-old and my 15-year-old have never been to school, never been to nursery, kindergarten, primary school, junior school, nothing like that. They're now in college because they wanted to go. But what works at school doesn't work in the home. And I think the mistake that people made during lockdown, many people who weren't familiar with the philosophy of home education, is they tried to fit school into home.
Right. Yeah. No, I can see that. So just take me back to then the decision you made, even at kindergarten, or at nursery school, how, where that came. How you decided I would not have my children go to nursery. Because, I mean, some parents, the kids, they're so full of energy, and you think, oh, I just need to have a few hours, plonk them in, bit of social skills, somebody else helping them along at that very young age before they get into perhaps the sort of more structured, government led curriculum style of school.
Yes. Okay. So, as a child protection social worker,
Mm.
one of the most important issues that I deal with is attachment. Now, when I when I go to court, because we want to remove a child or get some sort of order for a child or whatever, I have to do a whole section in my court statement about attachment issues. Now, attachment is a system, a biological system, like the reproductive system, the nervous system, the circulatory system. We also have an attachment system, and it's what distinguishes the warm-blooded animals from cold-blooded animals. So
Right.
birds and mammals have they have an attachment system. All
Yes.
birds and mammals do. Reptiles, amphibians, fish don't. And what that essentially is where birds and mammals all look after their young. I mean, apart from the cuckoo that fosters them out,
Yes.
right? Places them up for fostering straight or adoption straight away, right?
Yeah.
All birds and mammals look after their own young. And that relationship is so critical, it grows the brain. So if, for example, Richard, let's say you've got a 6-month-old baby
Hmm.
and the mother of the baby, you're with the mother's carried her, maybe breastfeeding, let's say she is, right? And she's just sitting with the baby in her lap, cuddling, cooing, talking to the baby, and the baby's smiling and they're just joyous and lovely, right? The baby's brains is firing neurons like crazy. Then you hold the baby and you're doing the same thing.
Yeah.
The neurons won't fire that much.
Right.
Then I hold the baby and I'm not the parent.
No.
The neurons won't fire so much. Attachment grows the brain.
And so initially attachment
You
with the
don't get
mother because they know the mother because that's where they've grown from.
Yeah, and there are certain practices. The fact that the mother grew the baby, if the mother breastfeeds, if the mother co-sleeps, if the mother, which is what we did, if the mother carries the baby, which can be harder as the baby gets bigger for the mother than it is for the man, right? But that process within human beings is 7 years.
Right. Oh, it's really interesting you say that because my children, we grew up my children grew up in the 90s. My first child, Stanley, who's 30, well, be 33 now. He, with all three of them, they slept with us. We had huge attachment, as you described there, and we breastfed, and we would never. You know how some people say, "Well, put them down and let them work it out and cry and what have." We would never do that. They were with us. We had a papoose. We did all those things. People were giving us advice on how to bring up the children, which was very much, "Oh, you're making a rod for your own back. You've got to put them in a spare room," and all of this sort of stuff. And we just thought that seems so alien. Because if you see tribes in different countries who do not have big houses and what have you, they're constantly got the baby and they're nurturing all the time, and the baby's needs were given absolute priority. And so we were still sleeping with the kids, or the kids were rather sleeping with us, until they were 5 or 6. I mean, mainly we had small house and we had a flat and things like that. So there was a lot of restrictions that they couldn't have their own rooms, but they needed us. And we would go to bed with them at bedtime and until they fell asleep, and then we would creep out. Invariably, we fell asleep as well, so and all of that. And it seemed a very natural process. So hearing you describe that is really reassuring because my kids are so independent now, and they can do their own thing. Whereas we were told, no, they'll be on your apron strings. You won't be able to get shot of them. They'll be sort of mumsy kids, and they'll be all. But they're so independent, and it was amazing. And when I tell that to people, they never believe me.
Yeah, but it makes complete biological sense. We are the only mammals that give away our attachment phase infants to genetic strangers.
Isn't that strange?
Chimpanzees don't do that. They don't give away their infants to some other troop. That troop will kill the baby, will kill that infant. Elephants don't give away their little infants, attachment
Yeah.
phase infants, to another herd of elephants. We do that. And the reason why we do that is all to do with, I think, the needs of industry and capital rather than the needs of the children and the family. Now, what you said about traditional ways of living and stuff, right?
Mm.
Mother's milk, human milk, is the most insipid, weak, puny, least nutritious milk of any mammals.
Right.
No, it's the best food we're ever going to have in our life cycle, right? Mother's milk. It's perfect for us, right? But compared to other mammals, it's the weakest. A
Right.
rabbit mum can feed her infants once every 24 hours and then leave them alone. With human beings, with traditional hunter-gatherers, they would carry the baby, and a baby feeding on demand could do it every 20 minutes.
Yeah.
What does that do? It's designed to keep the baby close. And if mum can't do it because she's exhausted or needs to rest, well, there's aunt, there's grandmother, maternal grandmothers, grandmothers. Most mammals, when the when the female is no longer fertile, she dies.
Oh, right.
Chimpanzees, they don't
Yeah.
have grandmothers. They stop being
Yeah.
fertile, they die, except with human beings, Homo sapiens, because then the grandmother can hang around and support the mother in looking after the infants.
That's really interesting. Yeah, because
And
when we was, as I said, we were sleeping with the baby, and people said, "Well, doesn't it wake you up all the time?" And my wife at the time, we're separated now, but my wife Dawn at the time would say, "No, it doesn't. We're basically doing it in sleep, and the baby would feed on demand, and the baby
yeah,
basically found the boob, and would just when it was hungry, and so we didn't have disturbed nights, and people
yes,
couldn't understand that." We were both light sleepers, and of course, if nappies needed changing and things like that, because Dawn was doing the breastfeeding all through the night, sort of, half and just sort of rolling over and bringing the baby on, perhaps the other boob, whatever. I
mm,
would do the nappies. It just seemed a fair exchange.
yeah,
So we can see how important that is, but we better get on to the
sure,
homeschooling. But that's very important to understand. It seems to me, the importance of keeping the kid or the child with the parents and doing that bonding and nurturing
yeah.
and yeah.
Yeah,
So
or trusted and close family members and friends. I would
yes,
give my infant to my brother. I would give my infant to my sister or my wife's family. No problem at all. I'm not giving it away to some paid functionary.
right. No, it's interesting because that's how society has developed and taught us, and we have all these books on how you're supposed to be educating this, and the government are trying to do that, and there may be, as you hinted at, and I think you're right, reasons why the government prefer you to do all of that through control, through a narrative, for capitalism, to train people up to be good workers,
Yes.
and things like that, which I think we're becoming a little bit more enlightened of this experiment that's happened over the last 150 odd years since the Industrial Revolution, really, in many ways. So,
Yeah.
so say they've got their child at school for some reason, and there may be multiple reasons. Of course, the child is having issues with the school, or the parent just do not feel comfortable with the curriculum or what the child is coming back from. Or in the case of Anna that we interviewed, there was bullying issues and the school was sort of a bit incompetent on how to deal with that. And so you're coming to the conclusion, maybe I should deregister the child from the education system and do this at home, which to somebody who's not used to doing that and has perhaps not experienced anybody else doing that could be quite fearful. So tell us through the steps, and give people perhaps an insight into those early days and what they would need to do and that
Sure.
sort of thing.
So for someone whose child is already in school, then what I would recommend is, well, there's a website, there's an organization called Education Otherwise. They have loads of free information about the law and how you can do it. And this is what applies to England and Wales. It's slightly different in Scotland and I think maybe Northern Ireland. In Ireland, it's also different, and in different US states, they have different rules. But certainly for England and Wales, you just send a letter or an email to the school saying I'm deregistering my child. And why you can do that is because the law is it's the parents' duty to educate their children either by regular attendance at school or otherwise. So I've been educating my children. My children have been home educated. Otherwise, by
Mm.
the way, I haven't been educating them, right? They've been home educated, but they've been doing it. Now,
Well,
there's so much I could say. So
mm,
one is get them out, 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 get them out. It does mean having to reorganize life. I come from a family which is incredibly educated. You know, my brother is a professor. My grandfather was a professor. Both my grandfathers are published authors. My brother's an author. My sister's got 2 degrees. I've got a first-class honors degree. My family are a generation of lawyers and army officers and judges and doctors and teachers. We all have to have degrees. So education is really important in my family. What happened was a social worker mentioned it to me many, many years ago, home education. I didn't know anything about it. So I started looking into it. Like, how does it work? What does it work? In a sense, right? Because I wanted to send my kids to a good school.
Yes.
And then I looked at various studies and it showed that. So if this is schooled children and this is home educated children, you match them demographically, home educated children outperformed school children 20, 30, 40% sometimes on every conceivable measure.
Gosh.
Social skills, emotional intelligence, numeracy, literacy, anything and everything. The home educated children just outperformed. And I saw that and I was like, well, why would I choose this?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I started looking into the types of home education. There's 3 types, broadly speaking. There's school at home, which I think a lot of religious home educators do, Christians and Muslims and Jews or whatever, right? Where you have formal lessons. And I think the mistake that people made during lockdown is that they tried to reproduce school at home.
Yes.
But you can't. Home is not school. I'm not a teacher. I'm a father, right? Then the other type is project-based learning. So you, Richard, are now my 7-year-old son. And what we're going to do for this month is we're going to learn about dinosaurs. Now you're 7 years old. You love dinosaurs,
yeah,
right?
Dinosaurs. I love them.
When we're learning about dinosaurs, we're going to be touching upon all sorts of other areas, biology, climate. Maybe I should have said trains because I know more about trains.
Right, yeah. Well, trains, dinosaurs take trains, don't they?
Economics, all that sort of stuff, right? So that's project-based learning.
Yes.
Because no subject is isolated on its own. Then the other is unschooling, which is what we did. And what I looked at is unschooling. Kids that are unschooled outperform all the other types of home education. So unschooled kids outperform everybody.
Right. So what is that? What is that?
Okay. Well,
unschooling.
Let me describe my children's life.
Okay.
Right, when they were younger. They're now in college because they wanted to go. I tried to discourage them, but I failed. Right? They're now able to choose.
But they're what? They're 18 and 15 now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
they chose to go to college. I recommended that they didn't. Right.
Right.
But anyway, that's another issue. Right?
Yeah. Well, now, they start to get their own mind at that point, don't they?
That's right. At least one of them regrets that I should have listened to you. So let's say they'd wake up, and let's say when they're about 7 years old, they'd wake up whenever they wake up. They want to wake up. They'd come downstairs into our kitchen diner, get the Lego out, start playing Lego. They might, as they're older. I mean, basically, you remember summer holidays, how good they were?
Yeah.
You could do whatever you like, go out, see friends, visit family, play. So that was my children's life every single day of the year.
That's really interesting. My sister homeschooled at the same time that mine went into the education system. Yeah. And I asked her, I said, what do you have to do? Because I thought that there was a set regulation from the government that if you're going to do, naively, why should they be involved in my children's life? It's got nothing to do with them really, other than they need to, not break the law, and perhaps they need to know that. And they may want to get on with qualifications, etc. And she said, exactly what you did. She said we would just go out, we would go to places. The thing about the kids were they would ask questions because they were sponges, and they would say, why is that such and such? Why does this do that? And my sister would find the answers, or they'd go online and look them up, or they'd go to the library, because back then it was 1990s, so it was sort of early before the internet was. You could just open a laptop and do that. So they would go to the library, they would find things out, and she would she would go where they wanted to go within the parameters that she could afford and what have you. And she had no money, and she had 3 of them. And at the time, and I thought she was bonkers because I didn't know how she could do it. She was a nurse as well. She had to just, I don't know how she managed it, to be honest with you, but she moved around. She rented different places and eventually ended up in Newton Abbot, where she is now. And the kids have flourished, absolutely flourished. They did go to college towards the end to get certain qualifications, but they're all working and they're all flourishing. But basically, it was like what you were saying. And interestingly, I asked Anna what she did, and she said, "Oh, it's quite detailed what they have to do." So clearly, she's either opted in or didn't know that there are these other, perhaps less structured ways of doing things that fit in more with your own way, unique way of life.
Yeah. Well, I think the hardest thing for me is I had to re-educate myself.
Right.
I did well at university. I had a great time at school. I enjoyed it. But so I had this idea that education looks like school.
Yes.
School isn't education. It wasn't set up for education. And there's a particular writer, John Taylor Gatto, Gatto, and he wrote this essay, 7 Lesson School Teacher. And if people Google it, or I can give you the link and people can check it out, and you can put it in the description below.
7, what is it called?
The 7 Lesson School Teacher.
7 Lessons School Teacher.
Yeah.
Right.
Now he actually won New York City State Teacher of the Year at least once. He won New York City Teacher of the Year 3 times. And after 30 years, he resigned in an op-ed in Wall Street Journal saying, "I'm tired of hurting children." And what he says is, and the essay is actually an acceptance speech. And he says, "Listen, I don't educate, I teach school. And what school teaches is completely different from education."
Right.
Right? My children learned about life through the living of life.
Yes.
So that when my son was 11, he purchased a little bit of Bitcoin because he heard me talking about it. He's an 11-year-old.
Yeah.
He's now 18. He's got bloody Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Multi-millionaire now, no doubt.
When he was, well, he didn't buy enough, right? No, when he was about 11, he started running a car wash in our street. So my wife sat down with him, did profit and loss. She helped him make flyers. He would leaflet them, and then he employed his sister, his younger sister's friend, and a mate to wash the cars.
Oh, right, yeah. So he'll just get the work, and they'll do the work.
It was a game for him. It was fun. He didn't have to do it, and he did it for as long as he wanted. When in 2018, on Boxing Day, we were in London. We went from London, the 4 of us went from London to Heathrow Airport, and we spent the next 6 weeks in Singapore, New Zealand, and Australia. All the other kids were in school. And we were visiting friends, really close friends. So I'm like, we're not going to look at kangaroos in a book. We're going to go and see the real thing.
Right. Yeah. No.
Now, we were able to afford that. But one of the things that home educated children have or they get access to, that I think makes such a difference, that is so neglected, it's ignored at school. They're happy.
Yes.
And they have happy childhoods, and then that shapes who they become as adults. They're just happy children.
So what you're describing there is very idyllic, and I can know that some viewers will be watching this going, well, that's great if you've got a number of things. If you can be at home with your children, if people are working because they're desperately poor, or they both need 2 jobs. In the old days, the man went to work and the woman stayed at home. But in this modern day, in the way that the government has structured it, or the world has become so expensive, if you've still got 2 parents, they may well be having to work and ships in the night and that sort of thing. What do you say to people who, and you must come across this, or difficult families where perhaps one parent wants to do it, the other one's not engaged in it and says, no, I don't want the kids at home, and things like that, the problems that obviously we have in this world.
Mm. Well, when my wife didn't buy into it, and it took me. Well, it wasn't until our eldest was 4 that she agreed. But it was also like she couldn't register them into a school because I didn't agree to it. So at some point, it had to get resolved between us, right?
Right.
And we
Oh, I
did
see.
do
But
it.
yes, so both parents mutually have to do this. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we're still
To
married.
register. Yeah.
If the parents are separated, then it's a whole other matter that I'm not even going to get to. It's a minefield, right?
Right.
The way I looked at it is that I think my job as a parent is to train my children and set them up for life. If there's this process, if this way of doing it produces this outcome,
Mm.
the normal, common way of doing it is produces this outcome.
Yeah.
Well, why would I settle for this? So
Exactly. Yeah.
So we did have to reorganize our life. We were a single income family for most of our lives. I spent 4 years sleeping on cousins' floors in London, Monday to Friday, doing social work there so I could earn more money so my wife could be at home while our kids
Yeah.
weren't at school because while they were young, right? So yeah, it takes something. It really, really does. But as a father, my life isn't my own. My job is to set my children up for life. So I was willing to do that. It isn't easy, unless, and if you have loads and loads of resources and everything paid off and more crypto than I have, right? Then maybe, right? But here's something else. Children of middle class graduate parents, when they go to school, they outperform the other demographic groups.
Right.
So my children, had they gone to school, they would have outperformed other kids because I'm a graduate, we're middle class, right? Home educated children, the group that does the best are the children of poor parents that didn't do well at school. They outperform everybody else. So
That
if you're
is.
a
Yeah.
single parent on benefits and you're home educating your children, yes, it's tough. It is tough. But your children will likely to outperform my children, despite all the resources that I have.
Right. Well,
And that's
that is an amazing message to take away, isn't it? That because poor people, and we were poor. I mean, I was an entertainer who barely managed to earn a living, and when the kids were at home, you to think that your children can be educated far better by what you do at home than and feeling like you're going to be left behind or your children are going to be left behind. That is an amazing take home to think about. So that's really encouraging. I mean, you've set one thing up which I think parents would absolutely in this day and age relish, is the early morning getting them to and from school, because you've removed that. The battle of the cars, the parking, the walking, the motivation of. I mean, at one day, I had to with my son. He was spending too long at night up, and I couldn't get him to sleep. And one morning, I really was struggling with him, my youngest particularly, to get him up and go to school. And we would have sort of arguments. He was sort of 13, 14, that sort of age. He grew out of that, and we laugh about it now. But at the time, it was hell, and I was on my own at that point. I got divorced, and it was very difficult. And if you're taking away that battle, so that you're not, in a way, for a portion of the day, hated by your children because their biorhythms work at a different rate, I can see that your relationship with your children must be hugely improved.
Oh, so much, so much. They're happier, they learn better, they have better social skills, paradoxically, which doesn't make sense to
Yeah, that is strange, isn't
conventional
it?
thinking, right? But we're just on that, right? I did warn you before, Richard.
Mm.
I know I'm an expert on this. I could wax lyrical about this for hours and hours and days, right? So as a child protection social worker, I see the worst. I see the absolute worst forms of parenting.
Yeah.
I see the kind of standard, and I don't mean to demean that, right? But
No,
what
no.
we normally do. And then I see what's available out of home education. And I'm really clear. I'm really, really clear. Why would I choose something inferior for my own children? There's nothing that I love more No one that I love more than my own children.
Hmm.
Now, school is not designed to educate. It wasn't set up to educate. It was set up to train children to conform, comply, and obey.
Right.
Now,
That
if
is,
you
yeah.
teachers don't know about attachment because I've asked them about it, they don't get how important it is. Um, Teachers don't know how schools were set up. Where was the first schools and why? And they don't know. And all that's happened is that system was set up for a particular reason, and it's been kind of molded a little bit. And now we think that, oh, this is for education. No, it's not. No, it's not. Richard, here's a little example, right? I don't know whether you're religious or not, or you pray. Just but for this, assume that you are, right?
Okay.
So you are now you have a faith and you're practicing and it's important to you and it's valuable to you, right? And you're in school and I'm the teacher and I say to you, Richard, I want you to. It's 11 a.m. I want you to go and pray. You say, okay, because prayer has value for you. Now, how do I know if you're praying because it has value for you or because you're being obedient?
Right.
The only way I can test for obedience is by having you engage in something that has no meaning or relevance or value for you. So I'm not going to ask you to pray. I'm going to ask you to memorize the kings and queens of England. I'm going to ask you to memorize 1066. I'm going to ask you to learn Boyle's Law. Like, you're ever going to need that in life. And if you are going to need that, well, you can always go and learn it anyway. Looking
Yes.
up an encyclopedia, or now you can go onto the internet. So it's designed to train people in obedience. Do as you're told. It's designed to train you in conformity. Be like everybody else. It's designed to train you in compliance. Don't complain. Put up with it. So this is the history lesson. In 1806, Napoleon's ragtag army defeated the Prussians. Prussia, northern part of Germany, had no access to resources other than through imperial conquest. So now Napoleon's defeated them. How on earth are the Prussians going to make any wealth, right?
Right.
There was a scholar, Johann Fichte. He lobbied the Prussian royal family to set up a system called schools, which later became schools, right, in English. And he said, if we remove our children from our parents at a young enough age and have them ordered about, engaged in meaningless activities by non-familiar adults, they will learn to be obedient. Those children grew up to become the incredibly obedient, disciplined foot soldiers of the Prussian army that went on to defeat Napoleon. Industrialists in France, in the UK, in Britain, in the US saw this and thought, oh my God, we can use this model to train you, Richard,
Yes.
that instead of having an independent livelihood and fending for yourself and taking care of yourself and being resilient and self-sufficient, you will work in my factory 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, making widgets without complaint.
And that's what people do.
And that's what people do. And that's where school evolved from. The 1870 Education Act set the standard school age in England from 5 to 10. 5 years old, you start, 10 years old, you end. Why at 10? Why at 10? Why did my cousins in Pakistan and India, like, well, I don't have any cousins in India, but hey, we're all cousins, right?
Yeah.
Why did they start school at 5? Well, the British Parliament figured that by the time a child had 5 years of schooling at the age of 10, they knew enough that they were then ready to go down the mines and
Right.
work as miners. So
Yeah.
wait a minute. So my cousins in Pakistan go to school at the age 5 because the British decided it and exported that model. Now, British Empire wasn't an exercise in philanthropy, but they exported that model to India, to South Africa, and other parts of the world that they colonized to train the subjects. We are your lords and masters. Listen to us, Follow our gods, not your gods. Don't listen to your parents. We're in charge. And then, well, that's not education.
No, no, and I can see taking that back to where we are today, and with the the obedience and follow the directives in which the government are at the moment, throwing in all these diktats of how we're going to end up in these 15-minute cities and have digital banks and digital IDs, that a lot of people are very much already groomed and trained, and the mainstream media is now adding to that, telling people what they need to do and how they do it, so that when you get to lockdown situations, as we just saw, people are already, they've been trained through school, from what you've just described, to be obedient and not have critical thinking skills and think for themselves, is this actually a good idea? Should we be hemmed into our houses? And they're effectively the foot soldiers of the government doing it. Whereas for somebody like me who did go through the education system, but once I got out the other end, I was pretty much self-employed all my life, and all that sort of schooling business, because I left at 15 and didn't go on to further education, I have managed to escape in many ways a lot of that, you must do this and you must do that. I still feel responsible when somebody tells me to do something I must do, but now I question it more. And but I think a lot of people just say, oh, but it's in black and white, you've got to do it, or they told us to do it on the television, or that bloke's in authority and seems to have more authority over us. And people just, when they say jump, they say how high, and all of that. So I can see exactly how having your children educated at home within the family, and the family's ethos and morals and the ability to think freely rather than being indoctrinated, has huge future for society if more people are out of school. Because the government won't like it, because then suddenly people will be radical and thinking for themselves and saying, actually, do you know what? Is this the best way of life? Should we just do our own thing? Like your son, just going to say, do you know what? Actually, I'll still learn stuff, but I'm going to set up a business at 10 or 7, at 7 or 10 or whatever, and learn about life and how things work.
Yeah, well, I mean, before he went to college, he'd already had four or five different businesses that he tried out, right? And I mean, some of the stuff, I'm like, where did you get that idea from? So when he was 12 years old, by the way, my wife is Scottish. I was born in Pakistan. When he was 12 years old, this is relevant. When he was 12 years old, he said to me and my wife, I want to learn how to speak Mandarin. I'm like, what? You want to learn how to speak Mandarin? Okay, why? And he says, well, China is a growing economic power. More people speak Mandarin than any other language in the world. I think it'd be useful.
Wow.
Okay. So my wife, how found the native Mandarin speaker tutor in our provincial town, right? And so he went every week for the next 4 or 5 years. He absolutely loved it. I had no idea. And it was entirely self-motivated. I didn't have to remind him to do his homework. He wanted to do it. He learned to read at the age of 8. We didn't push it. We read bedtime stories and read loads and everything. And I'd read the Rudyard Kipling's Jungle Book to him twice. Fabulous book. I refuse to read the Disney rubbish. I'm not reading Disney books to you, right? I'm just not going to, right? So you get those, fine. I'm not going to read them to you. We'll read the original Grimm's fairy tales and Beauty and the Beast and stuff, but not that Disney rubbish. So I'm reading. So we've read Rudyard Kipling's Jungle Book. It's a fabulous book. So he's 8 years old. He said, I want to learn how to read. Okay. My wife says to him, we'll phone your dad's friend who's a teacher. So he rings him up and says, listen, I want to learn how to read. What do I need to do? And my friend says, okay, well, create a timetable with your parents and have them practice with you. Okay. So he did that. We did that with him. And 15 minutes, on average, 15 minutes every day for 3 weeks. We did it. He chose the Jungle Book, Rudyard Kipling's Jungle Book, because he loved the story. It's not an easy book to read. Thee and thou in small print. And at the beginning, he's like, and like that, right? After 3 weeks of 15 minutes a day, I never had to give him another lesson. We were in the library. I see him sitting in the corner reading a book on his own. That was it. The trick is with home education, with unschooling, is wait till the child is ready and then move quickly.
Right. So
It,
you're listening to your child and working out what he's saying to you. Like he says to you, I'd like to learn to read. And you go, right, okay, let's do it.
let's do it. This is
Yeah.
how we do this, right? And my daughter didn't want to learn till later. And we did it differently with her because she's a different from her brother. My son did ballet. My daughter started doing ballet when she was 6. He's 8 or 9 and saying, I want to do ballet. I want to do ballet. You're doing too much. We're doing too much. We're not going to do ballet. You're doing this and that. We haven't got space. We're not going to do it. I want to do for a whole year. For a whole year, he said, we want to do ballet. He dropped some other club. Fine, you can do ballet. He did ballet until he was 14. He loved it, absolutely loved it. He said, if I was in school, I wouldn't have done ballet because I'd have
No.
got.
And think of that. I mean, just I went to mime school when one of the things that a lot of people don't know. I went to mime school and learned how you learn how the body works. And
Yeah.
even now, though I'm not performing in the way that I used to, going to ballet, mime school, anything physical like that, it stays with you. The ability to look after your body and actually learn about your body, and from an early age, even if you never, he will be able to move and dance
Oh,
and
oh my God, if I
hold himself.
told you what he does now, Richard, forgive me for interrupting you,
That's
but I'm
fine.
so passionate about this, right?
Yeah.
He's 18 years old. He does Muay Thai. He's encouraged me to go and join him, so he gets to bash me for not letting him upstay late, and I get to bash him for soiling his nappy as soon as I put it on, right? Right. So he does Muay Thai. He works a couple of days a week in McDonald's. He's running a business with 2 other home educated friends. He's going to college studying for 3 A levels. I don't have to tell him when to study. It's like, oh, and he does weight training and he's recently started jogging. His life, because what he got, it's not that the movement is great. Movement grows the brain, but here's something else. He knows who he is.
Mm.
He
Yeah.
he grew up. He and my daughter, they have to be responsible for their day. Maybe when they're about 7, 8 years old or 5, 6 years old, they'd come up to me and say, Abu, I'm bored. And I'm like, what do you want me to do about it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, and if
Your
you're
day
bored,
is yours.
one of the best things you can do is have a bored child because they'll start to motivate themselves and
Start
get them. They've
creating.
got to get themselves out of it. It's interesting you say he's got to be responsible for his day, or he is responsible for his
Yeah.
day, because I've been talking a lot about that recently, how we need to take back the control because we've given the government so much of our life, as if, I can't deal with this, so surely the government should be doing this for us. And I think, no, no, come on, we can stand on our own feet. We've got to be confident. We've got to believe in ourselves and take responsibility for our own lives. And this will get us out of the terrible mess of all this stuff that's coming down, because we can turn around and say, actually, do you know what? Ever so politely, I don't want it. Thank you very much. And if more and more people took responsibility, but because it seems very clear to me now, talking to you, how the training that has happened, or the grooming through the education system, has made us not feel responsible or confident for our own lives. And how you've just described your son is absolutely amazing. And any parent watching this will be thinking, that's what I want for my child.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
we're going to be running out of time, because clearly you could talk about this for ages.
I just want to say one thing about the bullying.
Yes, do please.
It's important, right? And I listened to the video that you had with Anna, and my heart goes out to her and her daughter and all the other children who are bullied in school, including myself a little bit when I was in school, not much, right? And then I know you shared about what happened to you at school.
Yeah.
Schooling can't resolve it. It's an outcome of the structure of schooling. It will always be there, and they cannot resolve it. It will never. And bullying, it harms the child that's bullied. It harms the bully because they think that's a suitable, appropriate way to carry on in life.
Yeah.
And they hate themselves for it, unless they're psychopaths, right?
Yeah.
Children generally aren't. And then it harms those that observe it. Because what if that happens to me? Could I be next? And it creates this atmosphere of fear and tension. And teachers can't stop it. School can't stop it. Just like if I go into I love swimming. If I jump into a river, I'm going to get wet. There's no way around it. Here's where I think it is, right? How it comes about. We are the most pro-social of all the mammals. We're the most pro-social. The brain is a social organ, and the brain grows in order to, it's the size that it is in order to develop relationships. And if you look at all the birds and mammals that have high intelligence, like crows and elephants and dolphins and chimpanzees and bonobos, right? They're all social animals.
Yeah.
And the one that isn't is octopus, but it's not a bird or a mammal. Right? They're also incredibly intelligent. Anyway, now how we access resources is through our social relations. And the bedrock of that is attachment. That's where relationships come out of. That's where social skills come out of. Everything comes out of attachment. Attachment's more important than being fed for an infant, because it's in that bond with that parent, with that carer, that the child will have his or her needs met.
And would you say this is instinctive to parents, that bond? I mean, it's being grown out of people, but it fit. I mean, when I was bringing up our kids, we were given all this information. You know, you should do this, you should do that. This is how you do it. This is how you deal with the crying baby and stuff like that. But we fortunately we both were on the same page. And we were just going, it seems wrong. Let a baby cry in another room or over there, and we're sitting here, you know, munching something, watching the telly, and we're trying to sort of... Just seemed intuitively wrong.
The Masai Mara don't put their babies to sleep 10 meters away under another tree. The San Bushmen of the Kalahari, they don't do that. The people in Amazon forest, okay, well, parents will sleep over here in this tree hut, and our babies will be in that one over there. No, we don't do that. Nobody does that. And for millennia, we haven't done that. But the thing about bullying, right? So one of the ways that we access resources, it's all through social relations. And there's a struggle for status.
Yes.
Now, in school, you've got 25, 30 children with no relationship with each other, really. They're not the same family. Being told, being engaged in activities that they have no interest in all day long with similarly ignorant and suppressed peers. This is going to be a struggle for status. So they bully and they tease. I'm better than you. Okay, you may be smarter and better than me at exams, Richard, but I can beat you up. Or I can call you names, or you can call me names, whatever it is. I can laugh at you and get my other friends to laugh at you. So there's a struggle for status, because they're all the same age. Now, within home education and within Sudbury Valley schooling, which is a type of school that isn't available in the UK, there's no age segregation. Here's what happens when I've seen home educated kids together. You've got a 5-year-old playing with a 7-year-old, and the 5-year-old wants to be like the 7-year-old, and the 7-year-old wants to be like the 9-year-old that they're playing with, and the 9-year-old wants to be like the 11-year-old, and the 11-year-old is playing with the 13-year-old, wants to be with the 15-year-old, who's kind of like sitting there being all cool, chatting to his or her 15-year-old friend, right? Everybody wants to be like the kid that's older, but the one that's oldest of all, by virtue of age, has the most status and can pass the message down, don't pick on the others.
Yeah. It's funny you should say. I mean, it's funny you should say that, because I had 3 kids, and my youngest was 5 years younger. So at 5, my eldest was 10, and Billy, the youngest, was desperate. You could see it, that structure, boy, girl, boy, and you could see Billy was being pulled up as well by Stanley, the eldest, who had taken time to learn everything, but Stanley would spend a certain amount of time, and Billy wanted to be him, or be at his level and play with him and those sort of games, couldn't quite comprehend, but was desperate to have a go, and so was presumably learning. And then Stanley would get to a point where it was like, look, dude, you're 5 years younger, I can't, there's too much now. As you say, I've got the status of the kids, so, I want to do this and you can bog off. But luckily, Georgie was between the two, so she could, go between the two. So it worked really well with the kids at home as a family unit. And we were and because we all slept with, that sounds really the wrong way, but because we were close and we nurtured each other in that way, and we'd all wake up in one big double bed, and that sort of thing. And it was lovely. And I can't understand how people do that and just have that so little respect for their children who are going to be part of the family, and they need to be nurtured, and will hopefully look after their parents as their parents become frail in older age. It's like it is an insurance policy as well, isn't it? As you become weaker and they're still strong, and they'll say, "It's all right, Dad, I'll take you down to the so and so."
Yeah, well, the relationship is much, much stronger. The bond is much, much stronger. And it's how human beings have grown up in mixed
Yeah,
age groups
we
for,
can.
for millennia.
So society, this modern society, has broken up so much of the family bonding, the true family way of life, and we've got to get back to that for sure. So
And
listen,
one more
yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Some of the stuff that there's a certain organization who's begins with W and ends with F, right? That are, because I know this is going to go on YouTube, and I notice how discreet and careful you are, right? That some of the conversations that they're out to drive with regards to, what foods are palatable, that it's
Yes,
okay for us to eat insects. No, it's not. That a child as 8 years old is able to make a determination about their gender. That's, in my opinion, it's all designed to weaken the bonds within the family. And
yes.
where the family gets broken apart, people are easier to control.
It would be fascinating to come back to this and do another podcast.
I've loved it, Richard.
If you're up for it, because we could talk more about the family bonding, about what's the threat that we've got, that people can then arm themselves by maybe taking the kids out of school, by thinking about the food, by thinking about the bond. And clearly there is another 50 odd minutes of conversation that we can have that people would get value out of. And I want to get you back, if you're up for it, to talk about the money situation, because that's one of your main things, and we'll put the links into obviously in the description, so people can find out more about you, and no doubt they'll start asking you loads of questions and things, which will be great. Before we wrap this up, however, let's just think how I want to word it. There are groups and societies that people can join and get advice from, presumably, out there, that they're worth going to.
Yes, absolutely. There's there's Education Otherwise, which on the resources page will connect you to local home education groups. And if you're thinking about it but unsure, then at the very least go and explore this arena.
Yeah.
Go and talk to other parents. I think that especially when our kids were younger, what was really difficult, I suppose, for us as parents, is the parents. We needed support.
Yes.
Not the kids. The kids were fine. They were being cared for by their parents, but we needed support. And I had many, many questions of home educated parents of older children. Like, is this really going to work? Is this really going to work? Oh my God, does it work? So definitely join those. Go check out John Taylor Gatto, Gatto. His interviews, his books, his articles, essays, stunning. Also John Holt, Peter Gray, who's a psychologist, Grey, who does a lot of stuff on free range play, alternative forms of education. So check those out. There's also a Telegram group, which I'm in, and I'll give you the link to that, which is for home education. And then what I say in there, because often if I can just say this, I know I keep a little bit more, right? I will advise home educating parents who are dealing with educational welfare or children's services. When it comes to social services, children's services, I can't say anything about, the allegations that children's services are making or whatever. I can just say to you how you need to relate to them and what the processes are and what's going to happen. And then also with education welfare, I can tell you the process there. I can tell you how to deal with them. And with both, they don't know anything about how this works generally. And absolutely money, and you may get comments that say that Bitcoin is a Ponzi. Well, actually, when you really drill down to it, Ponzi is the pound in your pocket. That's the real.
Yeah, well, this is something I want to talk to you about, because fiat money doesn't really exist, and it's a bit of a con. So of course we've got problems coming down. So there's definitely lots that we can talk about. One of the great things, I just round this up now, but one of the great things I found doing this since my channel has exploded is having people on like yourself who bring a whole new perspective to things that I've either half understood or not entertained at all. And it's been an absolute privilege, can I say, Rich, Crypto Rich, to talk to you about this, because so much of what you said has a huge resonance with me. I regret my kids going to school, but I'm very proud of how we brought them up, just intrinsically on those very early days, because clearly we've got that bit right, and that they are independent. And the fact that you potentially are now, with my audience, can reach people who may be sitting there thinking, bloody hell, never thought about this or heard about it, didn't really understand. And I think you may have whet people's appetite. And exactly. And I think, for the future of our children and the generation, with the problems that they clearly are going to be facing with a number of these rather nefarious situations that are going to be thrust on them and pushed down through government and from people advising the government and all of that, we need clearly we need critical thinkers, people who are confident in themselves, can take the responsibility and take the next generation forward. And it seems to me so obvious now that by educating the family in the proper way, in the human way, is the way that life can carry on with some normality.
Yes.
If we've got, if there's a chance, it's obviously us as parents and what we do, but the children need to break free from that the tyranny that has been foisted on them, and I don't think that's too strong a way of putting it.
Absolutely. And I'm going to be posting a video shortly in a few days' time. We're recording this on Sunday, 26th of February, where I say to a friend of mine about why they should take their 14-year-old daughter out of school when she was miserable, but also as a way of, like you said, so she grows up to be an adult who's responsible, who thinks for herself, who doesn't just blindly follow orders like so many people did, that they took this medical treatment just because the government said so.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, governments make mistakes.
And peer pressure as well. You know, that you felt, oh, I'm a bit hesitant, but your mates are saying, oh, but it's, it's for the good of everything. And that pressure, because nobody has been able to, think for themselves and be strong enough to resist.
Yes.
So there's so much in it. So Crypto Rich, I'll put all the links in the description. Thank you very much for that. So people hopefully will no doubt flurry. Do come back and we'll talk more about family and integration and all of that sort of things, and how we can perhaps deal with the things that are coming. And if I can pray upon you to come again for a third one where we talk about alternative money and what people can do to protect themselves in that way, and well, that's it really, protect themselves and see new alternatives. You're a very interesting man, and thank you so much for getting in touch. That's what I love about the privilege that I have suddenly found myself in this wonderful, honourable position where the channel has gone up, that people do get in touch. I know I often say I'll get too many emails, but people come and if I can give a platform to anybody and help anybody else, that's my duty, that's my service, that's how I feel about it. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's been an absolutely enjoyable conversation.
Yes, thank you so much. We shall meet and we shall hug. With consent, of course.
With consent, of course. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed all of that. Big thanks to Crypto Rich. The links will be in the description. And do join me again on another of my interviews or my monologues. And I'll see you soon.